Welcome to day 3 of Learn and Redefined, our first ever online conference celebrating teaching and learning. So this is something that everyone at Showbie is really, really proud of. I'm Graham Trick, I'm a learning specialist here at Showbie. And if you've not tuned into the first 2 days, just a little bit of recap. Showbie is the hybrid learning platform, and we're empowering over 3 million users globally. And we're aiming to provide richer, deeper, more personalized feedback through our platform. It's something we've been doing for almost 10 years, and it's something we're really, really proud of. You can find out more about us at showbie.com. During the presentation, please use the Q&A feature and ask any questions. Depending on the question, Matt might answer it there and then, or what we'll do is we'll save it till the end and we'll have a little bit of a session towards that. For now, I'd like to welcome Matt Pullen, who's going to run this session where we explore the use of technology in PE. So Matt, thanks in advance for the session that you're about to deliver.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well. My name is Matt Pullen. I am Senior Lecturer at the University of South Wales, also an Apple Professional Learning Specialist. And historically, I was a PE teacher for 12 years and started using technology probably about 6 years into my career, just as iPad came out, and before that with the use of iPods. And what I wanted to do today was really talk about how you can support PE and sports with the use of technology and the differences that it can make within that classroom and outdoor setting. So the first thing is I'm just going to pose a question to you, really, not necessarily to answer, but certainly something to have a think about. And that is, what do we actually mean by PE and sport in schools? Like, what is it that we think of when we consider PE in school? And we're going to kind of reflect on this throughout the session today, because I think at the start of my career, I saw it as one thing, and I definitely now see it as something very different. And I'll be honest, it was because of technology that helped me reframe what I saw as what sport was all about. Because I definitely didn't want it to be what it initially was, but that will come true as we go through the session today. So as with most things, I like to tell a story about what I did with technology. And it starts with me being just a PE teacher and being outside and teaching sport as I thought sport was meant to be delivered. It was, I would stand at the front, I would show everybody what to do, they would copy what I did, and then they would go off and have a go and try and do it themselves. And then I would walk around and I would tell them if they were doing it right or doing it wrong based on what I saw. And the thing with that was, it was fine when I was teaching things like football or rugby, but when it came to something like gymnastics, I'm not necessarily built to be a gymnast. So therefore, if they were copying me as the model of expertise, there was probably an issue with what they were going to come up with as a result. And I guess what I saw then was, when we had the opportunity to use, at first it was iPod touches and later iPads, we gave the site of learning to the students. We took away this idea of watch what I do and then try and copy it. And we actually said to them, watch what you do and try to see what you need to do differently. So those first few days were iPod touches. We would have about 4 or 5 available in a session. Students would just get the camera on the device. They would film their partners doing something. They would then spend a little bit of time giving some peer feedback, showing the kind of things that you would want them to improve on. I would potentially also find some very, very useful model videos of people doing the activities better than I could do it. So they would have that kind of expert model to compare it to. But equally, something that was really, really powerful was filming our students that could do it very well and using them as the model. And I quickly learned that if we kept putting videos of, say, Michael Jordan doing a layup on the screen, it was that expert level that was probably a prohibitive thing to show students, because he's 6'6" and can jump really, really high. And they're year 7 students or older, and don't have that same athleticism at that point. So therefore, how do they assimilate? Well, he does it like that because he's that tall and all of those things. How do I do it when I'm this tall, and do I have to push my arm further? So actually, just in me filming some of the students and being able to show that back to them, help them really understand the impact of what they had to do differently in order to support themselves in their development. And this was just using the camera. This was just iPod Touch. It was just film student, show it back to student, reflect on it, take the thoughts, go back to the PE. And one of those things that I would always fear, I suppose, was that IT could take over the subject. And one of the battles that we would have within the PE team that I worked in was we don't want it to all be about IT, because then the students might not be as active, and we need them to be active. We need them to be moving around quite a lot. So definitely something that we wanted to focus on. So something that really helped in those first instances was just being able to create visual checklists for students. So this was maybe just after iPad had come out. I had an iPad as a teacher. The students didn't have access to iPads. So the first thing I would do was create visual checklists for the students, something that could just help them understand what we were talking about. The example here of the javelin thrower, the amount of times I would be out on the playing field and I would say, no, you need to release it at 45-degree angle or whatever it might be. When you're throwing a javelin, I don't know if people on the call today have ever thrown a javelin, but when you're throwing a javelin, knowing that it's at 45 degrees would be fantastic. Knowing that it's not going to hit you in the back of the head is probably the only thing at first you're thinking about. So when a teacher tells you, no, it needs to be 45 degrees, what does 45 degrees look like when you're running down, trying to throw something, coordinating your legs, hoping that you don't hurt yourself? So actually creating this visual stimulus just allowed those students to be able to check for themselves, okay, I can see the kind of body position he's in. I can see that the javelin would be up here, the point of the javelin would be there. So I can kind of start to see those visual cues based on someone who does it well. Similar for the cricket, we would sort of show them those things. And if you're bowling a ball in cricket, throwing a ball in cricket, it's a very fast movement. So how do I know that my arm was in the right place when the whole action takes less than a second, from throwing it past your ear? So therefore, how do we check, are we in the right place? So by having, again, these visuals, and I'll be honest, at this point, they were printed out for students to be able to look at, really helped them break it down. And the other thing that happened here was that it gave the students ownership of their learning. So rather than it being something that I was showing them, this is how I do it, and this is what you should look like, and you should all look like me, we'd have the experts having those kind of images of the body position, breaking it down, showing them those different steps that need to go through. And then when a student was working peer-to-peer with someone, they could just call on those to say, look, his arm is at this position, his hand is holding it like this, his follow through is down here, his legs have stepped over each other. So something really, really simple. When we then kind of upped that and started to have more devices in the classroom, students took huge ownership of this. So we started to think about different technologies that could then help them. One of those that I just want to share with you now very quickly was Coach's Eye. And Coach's Eye, if you've never seen Coach's Eye before, is an application that can really support students in their use and understanding of technology and how it can support them in seeing what they're doing. This is a video of my son for data protection reasons. Obviously, I can't use videos of other students, so I've asked my son to kind of help me with this. And what Coach's Eye allows me to do, as you can see, using that bar across the bottom, is absolutely have that fine control of the screen. So in this example here, I was asking him to really think about driving his knee upwards, right? Because he needs to get a bit more height, needs to think about that momentum. And so when we're doing this, I can show him exactly what I mean when I say drive your knee forwards. Now I can visualize, I can talk to him about it, but there's nothing better than actually seeing it. And then there's other tools in here as well that you can use. At the top, you use the recording function. So rather than actually me giving him feedback, why doesn't a peer give him feedback against the success criteria and create a video that shows you those coaching points? Because actually, when we look at anything to do with sport, it's the time you spend practicing that is really beneficial. And if you're practicing away from the teacher, how do you remember all of those coaching points? Well, how useful would it be to have a simple video that you could call back on to just double check those points as you go through? You also have the use of the drawing tools on the side. So if you need to kind of think about some of those things in more detail, you just simply add these in. We should be looking up. That's going to help us sort of drive those things. And you're probably now familiar with seeing this if you ever watch things like the Sky Sports football commentary, and they'll talk about this during the halftime analysis and full-time analysis or match of the day. This is what they do. So again, we were giving the tools to the students that professionals were using in the sport to help them visualize and make sense of things. The other thing to quickly show you is in Keynote. Now, I love Keynote. Keynote is an absolutely fantastic and versatile tool. And in this, the idea is to use this again to visualize some of the things you're talking about with students. Here we just have a simple basketball court. I can move the blue circles into a position. I might be talking about a defensive setup. And then I could get the students to consider where would they stand in different positions, where would the ball go, etc. And you can see it's just the same as a coach's playboard. But the added benefit to this is that I could start to think about animating this. I could have those players move. And in fact, we used to do this when we do something called the 3-man weave in basketball, which is a highly complex movement pattern that students would struggle to watch on this 3-dimensional level because they wouldn't know where they need to run after they pass the ball. So we could just simply animate this and allow the students to be able to see when I pass it, I move out to this position. And then when I pass it again, I need to move to this position and keep moving through. And again, visually, you can see exactly how this works for those students to really concrete their ideas. Exporting this then as a video would allow the students to be able to reflect on that as many times as they need. So just a couple of examples there of some of those things that you can do using that technology. And then if we move on and start to think about removing the barriers to improve outcomes, for me, teaching moved away from being this idea of performance and students being experts at sport. It was more about students being participators. And we're always going to have those excellent students, but like in any subject, what about the other children? And those other children would come to a sport thinking, this isn't for me. I'm not a rugby player. I'm not a gymnast. I'm not a cricketer, whatever. And they would often feel that there was no place for them in those sports. So what we would do is actually start to think about them as coaches, give them the tools that enabled them to have those expert analysis skills that they would have that were sport-wide, that they could understand the sport inside out. And then they could coach people. They could help them understand for themselves how to get better. And in doing that, they then started to feel that there was a place for them within the sport that they were doing. We also did things within our BTEC course, a course which traditionally, when I was teaching it, was for students that were less academic. They put them on the sport course because it gave them an opportunity to get the grades that they would need. The problem was, our course was very academic and lots of it was about writing. So in order to prove that you knew something, you'd have to write a lot of things. And that then became a barrier to those students improving. So we simply started to adopt the technology that we had in the classroom, and we changed the assessment, and we give those students an opportunity to be the match of the day pundits, the Sky Sports pundits. We give them the tools like Coach's Eye to say, if you're analysing performance, you don't need to write an essay to analyse it. You can analyse it using a video. So film your teamwork, film your badminton activities that you might be doing, and then just record your voice over the top to show me what you know about how to get better. And that did indeed remove the barriers and then essentially improve the outcomes for those learners. And it was the simple things of just giving them a camera, giving them something that could personalize their learning and giving them a different way to demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. So what was the impact of that? I've told you kind of two stories of how we did this within our practical PE and also how we did this within our assessed PE lessons at Key Stage 4 as well. Well, what changed was we changed how students saw themselves within sport and literally changed that they could see themselves within sport. Again, I'm not the expert of every single sport, and sometimes we position ourselves in sport as those experts. But when you're teaching such a broad range of sports, you can't be an expert in everything. But what you can do is give students the opportunity to see themselves, to develop those wider skills, the ability to be able to reflect, to be able to communicate. And lots of the times we'd actually start to see developments within their numeracy understanding and their literacy understanding as they started to think about the terminology that they would use to support each other. And then something that really started to help was getting students to reflect beyond the classroom. And we would start to use Socrative. And it was such a simple thing to do. First of all, we used it as exit tickets because we were trying to think about how could we capture the learning that took place in the lesson to inform future learning. So just using a simple exit ticket, and the students would just use their mobile phones in the changing rooms whilst they were getting, changed at the end of a session. And we gather all of this really rich data. And then we started to think, our students play sport beyond school time. So why don't we get them to think about what they're doing beyond school time as well? So we would set really, really simple quizzes within Socrative to just get them to think about their techniques within sport and get them to see how they're practicing beyond the classroom time or the outdoor space time could actually have an impact on their learning going forward. So that kind of brings me on to just some tips and a few calls to action, just some things to think about when you're trying to think about the role of technology within PE and sport. I'm going to talk about this idea of feedback and reflection. What's the importance of it? We know it's vitally important in learning as long as we do it in the correct way. Talk about this concept of peer and self-assessment and what does that look like and why does that change the dynamic in the classroom and who does it change that for, and not necessarily your sporty outcome children, but actually all children. And then finally, this idea of changing access. So what does a learning look like in a PE lesson, and what is it that we're keen to see as an outcome for our students? So let's take a look at this first thing, this idea of allowing learners to see their own success and mistakes. And I am going to call them mistakes. Sometimes we say, areas to improve, but actually, let's take that language back and say it is a mistake. But you know what? It's not bad to make a mistake. We learn from our mistakes. So actually what I want to do is I want students to be able to see this. And one of these things, so apps like Coach's Eye or Huddle, or even just the camera and the slow motion were fantastic and will absolutely enable students to be critical in their thinking, think about their skills, but deeper things such as empathy and other areas such as their oracy and their numeracy skills. Coach's Eye enabling you to think about angles and trajectories and all those sorts of things can really start students to think about the links to other subjects. So I'm passionate about gymnastics, and so I therefore want to think about how do I increase my momentum, how do I increase my velocity, all of those things. And all of a sudden now I'm talking science, okay? So we're starting to think about how do we develop that. But equally, if I'm giving feedback to someone, the importance of empathy. So to say, look, this is what we think we're going to improve on. This is something you're doing really well. Let's look at this next thing. The example I showed you before of my son doing the long jump, we wouldn't just say, right, you need to change your arms, you need to change your legs, you need to think about your speed, you need to think about takeoff, you need to think, because that's not going to be helpful. So the idea of teaching our students to focus on small marginal gains and things that they can improve over time to really support themselves. And then the thing that comes with that, when you start to think about all of those different applications, is students are empowered to own their learning. It's them in the screen. It's them creating the plays in Keynote. It's them thinking up new drills, new sequences, whatever it might be. And then for me, the important thing is, what do you do with that stuff? Filming students within PE lessons or having students film each other in PE lessons is great. But if it doesn't go anywhere, what impact does that have long term? So the next thing to think about is providing a reflection space for students to review. And we know that feedback in the moment is absolutely essential, but so is a space to reflect on that learning. And when you have those videos and feedback, we can utilize tools like Showbie as a portal for that further self-reflection. Learners go home and they will practice the things they do in school. But what's missing when they go home and just practice from memory is that expert support that they had from their teachers, those video clips showing the angles and those sorts of things. And how powerful is it when they have that opportunity to show that to mum or dad or whoever's at home, to say, can you watch me then? And can you see if I'm doing this? Because mum, dad, or whoever at home may not be an expert in that sport, but you can provide them with the tools to really support their child to develop those skills further. And we know that children, will want to do those things. I see it myself with my own child. He comes home from school, tells me all about what he's done, and then says, Dad, can we go out and practice it? Now, I'm a PE teacher, so I can help him with that. But if you weren't a PE teacher, how do you continue to support and give good, honest feedback if you're not quite sure on what it's meant to look like yourselves? You can also use it the other way to flip the learning. For students that have never seen a certain sport before, why not give them some access to some videos in advance? Get them to get excited about what's coming. Get them to remove some of those misconceptions of, I don't know what rugby looks like, so therefore I know I've got rugby tomorrow and I'm scared of it. So there's some really, really powerful things. And it builds this community of sharing and feedback and openness in how we can all develop. And then why not use Socrative to check their understanding for those things? What skills would you use in this class? Give them the scenario-based problem-solving things that we see in sport. We would do this quite a lot in the sense of set a scenario for students. You've got 5 minutes left in a game. You're losing by 3 points in a game of basketball. What are you going to do next? And then have students talk about their kind of outcomes. What could we do? And then they would do that in the following lesson. So they'd have time to plan, think, and then they'd actually create that in their session space afterwards. So really encouraging this home learning idea and using it back in the classroom or sports hall. And then the final thing to think about is the kind of question that I started with. And what is PE and sport, and how do you measure it? And measurement is something that we think is really, really important, because that's how we show progression. And it's not that we judge people. It's not to say someone is a level 7 in football and a level 3 in badminton, because what does that even mean for that individual when it comes to playing sport? But what is it that we value? So is it that we value performance, or is it that we value participation? And what is the best outcome for our learners? And if we think about this from the point of what are our learners actually achieving, is winning a game at the age of 14 or playing a game of badminton at the age of 70 the most important thing? Am I judged by the fact that my students are competing on the playing field, or am I judged by the fact that my students in later life are still fit and active and healthy? So how do we encourage that lifelong learning for activity and health? And that's probably one of the biggest discussions that I've ever had within PE, is that balance between performance and excellence and participation and longevity. But what we want to do is make sure that we cater for all of those students in the classroom. And something like Coach's Eye and using the video does that, because your students can find a place for themselves as coaches and understand their role within sport, but they can help those other students become better at what they do. And I've seen that myself. I've seen it with students that turn up to a gymnastics lesson and say, this isn't for me, but they make great coaches and they help the students that do see gymnastics for them. And then, do you know what? It breaks the barrier of not feeling like PE's for them at all. And they still turn up with their kit and they don't bring in those notes to say they've got an injury. So I just think if we focus on performance, we do neglect that network of people that allow the performer to succeed. We can't all be the David Beckhams, although I probably shouldn't use David Beckham anymore because I'm showing my age, because everyone probably just thinks David Beckham's like this model these days. So I'll ask maybe Cristiano Ronaldo. We can't all be that one superstar. But for that one superstar to succeed, he needs a whole world of people behind him to help. And do you know what? Technology is the thing that can help those people see their place. I urge you this weekend to turn on any sport, turn on any sports program, and you'll see them using the very same technologies that we can use with our students in the classroom. So not only does it allow them to think about their own performance, but it also thinks about that career going forward. There could be a role for any one of your students in sport, but it might not be the sport that they saw in the first place. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that was of use to people and has certainly potentially stirred some questions up. And hopefully there are some questions coming through, Graham.
At the moment, there's none come through so far, but one thing I do want to ask you about is actually how you're using technology in teacher training side of things, because these are our PE teachers of tomorrow. And we had a discussion before the session about that. It would be great just to hear a little bit about that while people are putting their thinking hats on and hopefully coming up with a couple of questions.
Yeah, so I think in teacher training, it's the same thing. It's predominantly students will come in with their perceptions of what PE was like when they were in school, and things obviously have changed over the last 10 years, but not hugely changed. So therefore, often you see that technology isn't used in an outdoor space. I was once, when I was teaching, I was given a laptop as a PE teacher, and I was thinking, what am I meant to do with that? Because like, I'm not going to take that out on the rugby field. And so that was when we were using the iPad, and in our case, we used the iPad mini because it just fitted in the kind of pocket that you'd have on the front of your hoodie jumper. And it was easy to just kind of, bring that out and film something. So really, we're still in that phase, I think, with our trainee teachers to just show them that this is okay and technology has a place. And I kind of alluded to this in the presentation of, don't do it to the expense of the practical activity, because what you don't want to do is have children do a great warm up and then sit down for 30 minutes and watch a video on something and then not do anything. But equally, it's so easy to just show a student what they're doing, and so therefore having the iPads available on the side where students can go and grab them and use it to film what they're doing, record their voice. And then, like I said, put that into Showbie so that students, when they go home, can look at that and think, what do I need to do to improve? Because, we've got lots of parks. I'm sure that students this last year have tried to get out to do lots of physical activity. I've seen so much of it on Twitter where schools have urged children to use their back gardens, their yards, their local kind of playing field to do something. And I've seen teachers really, really kind of step up to make videos to show students what they can do. And I think Showbie is a great portal for allowing just that communication of visual prompts. What is it I need to do? How can I get better? But for me, the best bit is when you get those videos back from the students, say, look what I did. Look what I've done that I couldn't do before. And all of a sudden, there's that celebration of what we do. And maybe we think these portals are for that academic prowess, the marking of work, etc. But they can be for everything. They absolutely can support students. So what we do with our trainee teachers is to show them exactly that, and the other thing, I suppose, for certainly primary school teachers is there is usually that fear that I'm not that sporty. Okay. And lots of them that I work with, you'll get either the really sporty ones or you get the ones that just think, I don't have no idea. Well, do you know what? Sometimes you don't need to be the model. Like we said, use the students in the classroom to model it, show that back to each other. And again, technology is a really, really rich way of doing that. And they all love to watch Match of the Day, right? They all love to see the kind of video analysis at the end, and highlight the players and he should have run here. And that's such an important skill when you can use that, because we talk about critical thinking and problem solving, and that's it right there, and in a way that they love to do it. So.
I mean, talking about the football industry, that's a whole new job set and skill set within there. So every club have got video analysts, even working at the academy level. Just going back to what you'd said about the use of technology and that video capture, how do you ensure that the students don't get hung up on the quality of the production? So is that something you model yourself by deliberate mistakes in videos, and because I know what I'm like with video making. I very quickly get OCD and want to make sure it's perfect before it goes out.
No, I think it's just what we're using it for. So it's not that we're making a video. It's not going out to people for like this. We're not going to put it on Twitter and show everybody to the world. It's the use of video for a different tool. So I think it's having students understand the different uses of video. In this case, it's a self-reflection. I've done it before. Like I dabble with golf. I lose golf balls, basically, is what I say when I go and play golf. But just propping up my iPad to be able to see myself swing the ball. Am I worried about whether or not the background is set and whether or not, what am I focusing on? And so the use of video here is not as an outcome. It's not to celebrate something. the use of video in this context is as a teaching tool. That's all we're using it for. So video quality, as long as you can see what you're doing, that's the main thing. So we do talk about those things of, you know, the angle you're looking at it, because that's, you know, if you're looking at something like javelin from a strange angle, you're not going to get the actual angle. So you would think about, you know, if I'm judging those sorts of things, but that's about it. Is can you see the object that you're trying to support within the video? But it's not going anywhere. One of the things that we would say is, look, this is going into Showbie for us to reflect on, but it's not, we're not going to suddenly take this video and put it on Twitter to show everybody it. This is a learning and teaching tool, not a kind of celebration tool.
So it's all about capturing it in the moment, and it doesn't matter if there's mistakes, if it's really, really raw in terms of the finished article.
No, it's just that visual feedback, isn't it? That's all it is. It's just, I could stand there and explain to you that when you're doing a forward roll, your left leg was slightly out of sync with your right leg, which like when you've done a forward roll, I don't know the last time you did a forward roll, Graham, but you're just happy you did a forward roll, right? You're just happy that you didn't break your neck and that you're standing up on the other side. So watching that back is so much more powerful than someone telling you what you did, because you can see it. You can see your leg was in the wrong place, right? You don't need me to tell you that, but you do need me to tell you it if I didn't film it. So the film is like I said, it's not the main thing, but it is the main thing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads on when you're thinking about that different modeling, and I suppose sharing good practice. Are there any subjects that lend itself well to complementing what you did in the PE department? So I don't know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking drama, something like that. Was there anybody who you think outside the department, actually what we're doing is similar in terms of process, can we work together?
Absolutely. I think, well, drama and funny enough, design technology were the ones that would kind of jump on this and think, well, hang on, that's no different to what I'm doing. I need to show people technique. When I'm talking to someone in drama about their, or a student in drama about their positioning on stage and their movement and their back to camera or the audience, whatever it might be, I can tell them that. But again, if you've just done a 5-minute soliloquy, you're probably not going to remember that in minute 2 you turned your back on the camera, right? But if you filmed it, so actually this was the fun thing of showing drama teachers coach's eye, or showing design technology teachers coach's eye, because they see it as a sports app, because obviously it comes with a baseball cap on the front and everything, and say, no, actually it's just a filming app which allows you to really, really pick apart things. Using it with science teachers, again, absolutely fantastic to pinpoint where chemical reactions took place. I'm sure people on the call have seen the elephant's toothpaste experiment, when you slow things down, and I've done that in just slow motion in the camera. But when you really pick that apart and then use the annotation tools on the top of the screen, absolutely fantastic. The other thing about the kind of cross-curricular thing was we had students that hated maths, right? And I'll just say it outright, children that just did not see maths for them, but they loved sport. And the links between maths and sport are huge. Like we talked, I said it in the presentation then, the angle of release, you know, the angles, the shapes, all sorts of things. Statistics in sport are huge. Like it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in itself because of, you know, betting and all of those things. We won't go down that avenue, but statistics are in sport all the time. So actually what we would do is take some of our maths students out of the maths classroom and teach them maths in the PE environment as like co-teaching, and have students actually use those same tools and then show their knowledge of maths in a practical environment, and that would be shared back to the maths teacher, so the maths teacher could see, yeah, they do get it, they just struggle to do it in the classroom, and they struggle to do it without that kind of visual representation of things. So there's so many opportunities to tie subjects together. And something, again, like Showbie allows you to do that, because it's kind of all with the student, or the teacher can be a co-teacher in the class and say, actually, I've just noticed you've done this within your PE lesson. Let's use this as an example in our next maths lesson to talk about trigonometry or Pythagoras' theorem. And then equally for English, like students that are analysing performance and they come up with this 10-minute long analysis because they're passionate about sport, and then they're asked to do an analysis about a text and go, oh, I don't know, and don't say anything, and they're doing their kind of oracy development things. Why not give them that visual cue to talk about it, so that that's the link for the students?
Yeah, yeah, and it's little features within Showbie like the copy files, so they can copy from a PE and leave that file in the PE assignment where it's needed, but then take it across to the maths that make that really a super simple activity to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like caffeine's kicked in too much, so we haven't got any more questions, Matt. But you know, it was a fantastic session. I just want to thank you again for joining us on the early shift this morning. If you're joining from elsewhere in the world, it might be the late shift for you. And thank you for coming along to listen to Matt. So yeah, in terms of what we've got going on today, there's other sessions around subject-based sessions around psychology. We've got a fantastic session this afternoon about augmented reality and the experiences there. We've also got panel discussions and educator interviews. So please feel free to come along and sign up. And, you know, if you can't make it, feel free to watch it back. So Matt, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you to everybody for coming along.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.